into the chat. And thank you for taking the time to be here today. It's an important conversation to be having as the Democratic Party chooses its new leader of the DNC. Now, without further ado, candidates, welcome again. Thank you for taking the time to meet the people where they are. I think it's a hopeful new start to an era of transparency and success for the Democratic Party. Now, I'm going to say right off the top that Democrats around the country are really struggling. They are feeling defeated and rudderless and leaderless in many ways. And if you see the first part of the special counsel's report being released yesterday, we can now see that there is hard evidence of what most of us already knew, which is that our next president took illegal actions to overturn our last election, to destroy our democracy, and is only a free man because he ran for president again. However, in less than a week, we appear ready to turn the country back over to him and his apparently incompetent cabinet and a group of what appears to be his hateful, bigoted friends and donors. These people are, as we said before the election, a danger to our country, to its people, and to any Democrat, as the next administration and the right-wing media ecosystem has painted us all as the enemy. And I think we only have to look as far as how the Republican Party is treating Los Angeles and California right now in the middle of this ongoing and horrific natural disaster. So, knowing this and seeing the disappointment from Democrats around the country, not just with the election loss and our apparent inability to connect with enough people to convince them to vote against this chaos, what do you think the role of the DNC is moving forward? Because a lot of people don't even understand what the DNC does. They see it as Democratic leadership, but I've been told by DNC members themselves that it's just one piece of a far bigger Democratic puzzle that has no real power. So Jason Paul, I want to ask you first. You've said that there are two DNCs. One when we have the White House and one when we don't. That when we don't have the White House, the DNC tries to innovate and figure things out and connect with the people. But when we do have the White House, the DNC has a tendency to become a rubber stamp. You've said that we need to come up with plans that are so innovative and bold and so helpful to people's lives, things like the Affordable Care Act, that once people have them, they won't want to lose them. So briefly, how do you propose that the Democrats do that?
So it starts with me with changing our relationship with our donors, because the people who give to this party, whether it be the DNC, the candidates, all the thing, are being really badly treated. And I say that because I'm one of them, and my phone, my inbox, my emails are flooded with desperate pleas for money that took place even after the election. Those sort of abusive relationship that we have with our donors, where we're just give us money now, even when we lose an election and we don't need it for 2 years, is really damaging to our ability to do things. Once we repair that relationship, we can move to a subscription model whereby the people who are on this call, the people who want to be this party, are chipping in $10 a month, $20 a month, and then we don't ask them anymore. And once you do that and you hopefully get the money that you need to have a party that's of abundance, then we want 10,000 paid local organizers in every county, plus 50,000 and then one for every 50,000 additional population. LA can't have one organizer, that'd be ridiculous. And then once you start to have those things, then you build from there on what do those people need. In Putnam County, Indiana, the chair there wants my organizer, but he thinks that, well, are we going to be able to afford it? And my answer to him is, we have to be able to afford it. We have to be local. We have to be everywhere. That's our only way to have a party that works.
All right. James Skofis, you've been the most vocal, I would say, in this group, that Democrats can't keep playing with what you call the old, stale DC playbook. And I think most people would agree with you, but could you expand on that for us, again, with brevity for time?
Sure. Thanks so much, Lee. And one of the examples that I've been sharing in some of these forums is that I've heard from DNC members in battleground states who received 15, 16, 17 mailers daily in their mailbox from national Democratic groups. And I've run enough campaigns in deep Trump territory, competitive races, to know there's nothing that 16th mailer is doing that the 15th mailer wasn't already accomplishing. And so, look, I've been making the argument for 2.5 months now that if we want to turn the DNC towards new tactics and bring in new voters and bring in a new generation of ideas and creative, innovative thought, what better way to do that than to bring in a new generation of leadership within the DNC and the National Democratic Party? And so, yes, we've got to throw out the old, stale DC playbook. We've got to stop bringing back the consultants who have failed us time and time again and try something new. And as an aggressive outsider, that's what I'm bringing to this race.
All right. Marianne Williamson, I feel like you've also been very vocal on the Democrats doing things in a different way. You've said that the DNC has an engagement and a transparency problem, and that DNC members feel dismissed and disempowered. Why do you think that is? And what do you think needs to be done about that? Again, I would say speak with time in mind.
Okay. Right now, the power, the money, and the decision-making is held very tightly in the hand of just a few people, including these 4 consultancy groups. And basically, most of the members of the DNC just feel like they just go to meetings and are told what's going to be happening. Now, remember, politics is not about just what happens in DC. The electorate is out in America. So one of the first things that needs to change is that decision-making and money, all forms of power, need to be changed, need to be shared with the states. Washington think is not America think, and Americans don't even particularly like Washington think. So this elite crowd who makes decisions and just dictates everybody else how we're going to do things, it's very important that we all be clear. They have failed the American people, I believe. They've certainly failed the Democratic electorate. The failure is across the board. We lost the House, we lost the Senate, we lost Michigan, we lost Ohio, we lost Wisconsin, we lost Pennsylvania. We must begin again. And the American people need to see that we're really transforming. And that's why I believe it's not enough to just take the status quo playbook and do it better. We need a complete transformation, and that will have to do with, first of all, the culture of the DNC. Certainly for myself, if I were DNC chair, a very different relationship with the staff, with the members of the DNC, with the state parties, and I also think with the people of the United States, far more real, far more authentic, far more ballsy, far more audacious, and far more real.
So just less behind the doors, less behind closed doors, more transparency, more speaking with the people, or at least speaking with the state party chairs. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, more than speaking, but also standing up for the actual values of the Democratic Party, so that there is no doubt on in the American people that we are unequivocal advocates for the working people of the United States. Right now, I think we read as kind of trying to have it both ways. We want to help people, but not so much it will go beyond the line past which we would be offending our donors. We've got to be clear. People need to recognize us once again as the party of the people. Too many people doubt that right now. That's why people are so afraid of Donald Trump, because he's clearly not a party of the people. We need to make it clear to people every single day that we are.
Speaking of the donors, Ken, you've said one of the biggest concerns coming out of the 2024 election, and this is for Ken Martin, is that America's perception of the 2 major parties has switched, that people think the Republicans are the party of the working class and the Democrats are the party of the elites. What do we do about that? Because based on policy, that's obviously not true, but because the Republicans have clearly used their extraordinary messaging machine to paint the Democrats however they want, people think it is. So how do we redefine ourselves under these constraints?
Well, thank you so much, Lee. And it's a great question. There are a lot of reasons this happened, of course, and you mentioned the perception problem we have. But one of the reasons is that Republicans were able to define us as Democrats before we were ever able to define ourselves, right? They spent an inordinate amount of time since 2020 beating the hell out of the Democratic Party and Joe Biden in an incessant drumbeat in non-traditional information spaces, right? Podcasts and streaming services and digital spaces where we weren't even competing. And so we need to realize that we absolutely have to do a better job. We think we sound smart when we say Americans don't read newspapers or watch TV anymore. No shit. I mean, here's the thing. About 40% of all Americans say they actively avoid the news. So when people are scrolling and consuming more information than ever before, they likely don't even consider it news. As Democrats, we've been trying to solve the problem of where people get the news instead of what news is. Republicans jumped on this and they invested in an information feedback loop to constantly portray a false image of Democrats. Republicans understand how the algorithm economy works. They understand how the lie economy works. Democrats need a massive realignment of our information strategy at every level. Engaging in creator spaces where people get their information is vital to this.
Absolutely. You've also said that we can't myopically focus on 26 or 28, that the party needs to be focused on the next 10 years and not just the next two. Do you think that that's essential?
It's absolutely essential because, as Wayne Gretzky once said, I sort of feel as a Minnesotan, I have to use a hockey analogy. You
Well, I'm a
can't
Canadian, so I'll take your hockey analogy.
There
There
you
you go.
go. There you go. Well, we can't skate to where the puck is. We have to skate to where the puck will be. And what I mean by that is we can't just look at one election cycle, because if we do, then we're constantly engaged in having to recreate the infrastructure. The role of political parties, of course, is to win. But to do that, we have to build long-lasting and durable political infrastructure. We also have to skate to the moment. As I mentioned, we have to realize that the map is going to shift, and that we have to be recognize that if we're just planning for one election, we are not seeing where things are actually heading in this country. We know that the political map is going to shift. Most of the power is shifting to the South and Southwest, and we have to start preparing for that now, right? And for me, the DC committees, whether it's the DNC or our sister committees, have been too myopically focused on just one election. Let me share one story with you on that. Well, I was down with Brandon Presley in Mississippi in 2023. I asked him, what more could the DNC be doing to help you in this moment? He was our candidate for governor, and he was tied with the Republican incumbent Tate Reeves. He said years of indifference and disinvestment in southern states has led to this moment where I'm on the verge of becoming one of the few governors elected in the Deep South, yet there's no infrastructure on the ground to meet me in this moment. I have to build it all myself. Think about this. If we had looked at Mississippi 10 years prior and realized there's more African-American voters in that state per capita than any other nation, and any other state in the nation, and we did what Stacey Abrams did, which is actually register voters and mobilize them, we would have been able to actually build something to help Brandon Presley meet that moment. That's what I'm talking about. As a national party, we actually have to skate to where the puck will be, not where it is. We need to get out of just seeing beyond our nose and seeing for the future of where this Democratic Party will be.
Right. Martin O'Malley, do you agree with that? Do you agree that we often, to keep with Ken's hockey analogy, we're often playing defense as Democrats? We don't go on offense enough. We allow other people to define us. We allow the other team to constantly score on our open goal. What do you feel about that?
I agree with all of that, but I think
Yeah.
we've been falling further and further back within the blue perimeters of a lot of our states, and we've yielded entire states and act like we won't even compete there. I mean, get this. The three main sponsors in their state legislatures of abortion ban bills, the one in Mississippi, the one in Texas, and also the one in Ohio, those state legislators went totally unchallenged by any Democrat, any Democrat. And then we blame people in these so-called red areas for not standing up, not turning out to vote. So we have to extend the battle line. We have to also create a center of excellence for digital communications. And we have to constantly and continuously communicate with people throughout the year. And we're going to have many opportunities to do that as Donald Trump makes decisions that adversely impact the economic security, the health and well-being of our hardest working citizens all across America. It's not like he's only going to hurt people in blue states, you know? So we need to get up on our toes. We need to start engaging. We have to bring forward the younger generation of Democrats who we've totally disregarded, who we don't listen to. I mean, there is a causal connection between how much better than us the Republicans communicate and how much better than us they engage younger people in the activities and the leading actions, which then lead to winning elections. So from the first day I was in this race, I've been preaching that we need to make some changes if we are going to win the next elections. Registering voters to vote directly as a party, fighting for voter rights all over the state, recruiting candidates to run all across the ballot. You know what? I can't stand the term down ballot. It almost sounds condescending. When a young man or young woman, old man, old woman puts themselves out there to run for office, that's a big deal. And we need to celebrate that. We need to lift them up, and they shouldn't have to rely on their brother-in-law to place their Facebook ads, you know? We need to equip our candidates with the modern tools, techniques, technologies to communicate, and we need to create that big wake so that they can surf in a party that's on the side of working people.
I agree with that. I also think that watching the DNC forum on January 11th, I got the sense that you all fundamentally agree, all the candidates fundamentally agree that the Democrats can't just continue to focus on the 7 swing states or divide the nation up into red and blue states and cede what are considered red states to the Republicans without any of a fight. You're talking about uncontested races all around the country. We see it all the time, right?
Let's get out of the battleground state mentality. All of America is a battleground. Let's get engaged.
I agree with that. Now, the question is, we can't just, we're not going to just show up in states like we've been doing. If we're going to change things and build relationships with communities rather than just sort of pulling in before an election to ask for a vote we haven't earned, I would say, Ben Wickler, you've said that it's not just about a 57 state solution, meaning 50 states plus DC and our territories. It's about 57 state solutions. Could you expand on that for me, please?
Absolutely. And I'm so thrilled that Chorus is having this forum because
I know, fun, right?
I mean, it's so great. And the folks that are watching right now, welcome to the American political battleground. The fight right now, DNC chairs race, and then we've got races all across the country, including Wisconsin on April 1st. We've got to fight every day. And that is the basis for why we need a strategy in every state that is about the fight in that state. In states where Republicans set the voting laws like Wisconsin, there's voter suppression and voter protection is essential. In states where they haven't made door-to-door voter registration illegal, which they've done in Wisconsin, but many other states, the party should be doing partisan voter registration to find and register Democrats on a year-round basis, as Ken was saying about Mississippi. And I'm honored to have Stacey Abrams' support in this race because you need to plant the tree now so it's big enough by election day that we can climb up it. Every state has different fights. The work we need to do in each state is different. But if we build a 10-year plan for each state now, then we can build a program where people can see how they can plug into that work. They can be part of winning elections, maybe flipping a mayor's seat. Maybe it's a state legislative seat. Maybe it's winning a trifecta or breaking a Republican supermajority. And if we do that work, people will know that they are part of the story of the comeback for the Democratic Party fighting for working people hand in glove with the union movement in every state across the country. We've done that in Wisconsin. We're the only state, only battleground state where we actually we're the only battleground state where we added the number of votes that Harris won among young people relative to 2020. We're a state where the shift because of Republican turnout was counterbalanced in large part by an increase in Democratic turnout across our state. And that was the fruit of year-round organizing and communication on every platform in every corner of the state of Wisconsin. That's why I'm so excited about the DNC chairs race, because if we do this right, then we're going to have a chance to win a ton of elections and deliver real change for working people.
Which is something I think all of us would love to see. Now, I know that I haven't spoken with everyone on this group, but if we are going to be talking about this kind of 57 state solutions, one of the things we do need to be concerned about is our Southern strategy, a region that Democrats in many ways have sadly ignored for years. So I'm going to pass the conversation over to Elizabeth Houston, who's going to be focusing on these regions and the 92%. So I want to thank all the candidates for your time and for talking to me. And Elizabeth, over to you.
Thank you so much, Lee. Hello, everybody. I'm so glad to be here. Hi, thank you for your time. So I wear a lot of hats. One of them is lawyer and law professor. So I'm going to set some ground rules for the conversation I'm going to have with you. The first one is timely. I need you to try to keep your response to about 90 seconds, just so we can cover as much ground as possible. I also need you to be responsive. That means if I ask you a yes or no question, answer with yes or no first and be as specific as possible. I don't want to hear about infrastructure. Please do not use that word in the conversation with me. If you're talking about infrastructure, I want to hear, what does that mean? What are you talking about? You're talking about transportation services. You're talking about explain it for the people. So first of all, raise your hand if you know who the 92% are. Okay, so the 92%, that means the percentage of Black female voters who voted for Democrats in the last election, Kamala Harris. So what we're talking about there is Black women are exhausted, dejected. To be blunt, we're tired of this shit. And we're tired of constantly doing work and seeing pretty much no outcome, very little reward. And in particular, we're tired of our roots being ignored by Democrats because the majority of Black Americans live in the South. We have a lot of ties to the South. I myself am from Memphis, Tennessee. And so to see the South be so left out, for example, to see the DNC last minute bump the Tennessee 3 off of speaking on that stage is very hurtful. We get very offended by that kind of behavior. And I want to direct this first question to Dr. Hathaway. Thank you so much for being here, my fellow Tennessee native. I am so honored to be in your presence today. And I just want to know, do you think that the next DNC chair needs to focus have a concerted effort on the South? And if so, why and how?
Hello, Miss Houston. It's always good to hear from fellow Tennesseans. I used to go back and forth through Memphis many times over the years as I was traveling from Jackson, Mississippi, back home to my native land of Nashville, Tennessee, and also come across I-40 when I would come out of Little Rock, headed home to see family, friends, and also to go to my house of worship in Nashville. I'm so glad to hear that all of us that are running for the chairship have decided to take our direction, our stance along going down this path of the Southern strategy. I've been saying this since I entered into the race, that is the bedrock, the battleground for the African-American vote. If we look back over the course of history, in 1984, as well as in 1988, when Reverend Jesse Jackson ran for the presidency of the United States, he came up very formidable in the Southern United States because the African American vote is what carried him forward to be able to win several caucuses as well as primary elections. I think at this present time, we ought to adopt a similar strategy, given that we need to make the intentional investment to get as many people registered to vote in the region, to mobilize them, and to turn it out. I'm so glad that Ms. Houston brought this up. From the statistics that I saw, 94% of African-American women voted for Vice President Kamala Harris, and approximately 80% of African-American men voted for Vice President Kamala Harris in this last election. Oftentimes, when we want to touch upon race and ethnicity in our politics, it is a real and ever-present matter because history has been a dictate of this American experiment with democracy. We are going to have to spend the financial resources, the human capital resources, as well as speak directly to the interests of African Americans, as well as the second most leading voting bloc in the Democratic Party, which are those of Hispanic descent. We must be multilingual in our approach. Even just maybe a couple of years ago when I was running for the congressional seat in Arkansas 2nd District, I've actually created a national voter registration document. Multilingual, electronic. I mean, at some point, if given the opportunity to be the next chair, we can implement that. But I'm telling you all, we have to go into the South, mimic what happened in 1964, bring people from all over the country to be the epicenter of the South and get everyone prepared to flip the South blue. Because we have conceded the South to the Republicans. No longer can we not be involved in the litigation process, not addressing racial and partisan gerrymandering and cracking of our urban centers, because on any given day, urban centers are what leads the Democratic Party. That is where the majority of people of color in this country actually live, and the majority of the African American population still to present day resides in the South.
Dr. Hathaway, I want to ask a follow-up question because you touched on something. When I let my followers, my supporters know that I was going to be doing these interviews, I had a lot of folks bring up, well, what can the Democrats do when the Republicans have gerrymandered everything? But it sounds like what you're saying is it's not time to lay down and die, that the DNC and the Democratic Party has the power to actually fight against this gerrymandering, but haven't done enough to do so. Is that what you're saying?
That is correct. So I was an amici on a racial gerrymandering case, Simpson et al. V. Thurston. I filed my brief back in February of 2023 to express just that. As I was conducting the research for my brief, because I wrote it myself, I think I can, do some legal work here and there. But as I was doing the research for my brief, I saw that Republicans, the RNC, as well as their army of attorneys, there's one attorney in particular, he has a unique kind of name. He was the main individual filing the briefs on the behalf of the RNC. There was an absence of the Democratic National Committee filing briefs. Immediately upon my election to the DNC chairship, I planned for us to assemble an army of attorneys to go out and file briefs on the side of those that are against voter suppression, to expand the tenets of voting rights, to go after racial and partisan gerrymandering, also to work with our brothers and sisters and organizations, as well as private individuals that are willing to step out from the fray and make this a central issue when it comes to expanding voting rights in this country. Also, I believe it was on yesterday, we sat in a forum. And in that forum, there were people, scrolling through, writing comments. I was trying to be as participatory as possible. But some people are upset that we are not doing enough to court the Black vote. The DNC must do better because the United States of America is blackening, browning, reddening, yellowing, and becoming less white. And we must speak to each of those demographic shifts.
Thank you so much for that response. I do appreciate that. And I actually, I want to turn it over to Governor O'Malley. You made it just below the Mason-Dixon line. So I got this question for you as the former governor of Maryland, which is actually my current home state.
Really?
Yes,
Where do you
absolutely. Silver Spring.
Silver Spring, okay. That's where I grew up in a small log cabin.
Oh.
Actually in Rockville. Okay.
Oh, okay. That makes more sense. Well, they're calling Maryland the Wakanda of the United States now because we've got a lot of Black leadership all the way from West Moore. We've got Angela Also Brooks. We've got a lot of great leadership here in Maryland, and you as part of our past leadership. I just want to know, same question. Do you think that the DNC chair needs to have a concerted effort on focusing on the South? And if so, why and how?
Yes, absolutely. We have, and I really appreciate what Dr. Hathaway underscored, which is we got out of the business of defending voting rights. I've asked, how did that happen? It seems that the DNC was in transition away from paying lawyers to do it, and they were transitioning to trying to get lawyers to voluntarily do it. And anyway, again, we yielded the battlefield. But no, the emerging South, the new South, and I've been endorsed by Tim Kaine, who is a former DNC chair. And you look at the direction that Virginia has taken, you look at what you described as the blue flame of Maryland and all of the strides we've made. You look at the gains happening in North Carolina. I mean, that was a success story across the whole ballot. So the South is where our opportunities are. And the South is where we need to go in with both feet and start registering voters directly, defend voting rights everywhere. I believe that we should actually put up in every legislature a voting rights amendment to the Constitution. Let the other guys say why they aren't letting it out of committee or why they're not voting for it. And we need to recruit candidates. After 2016, I was a surrogate for Hillary Clinton in 30 states, but then I continued with my own leadership effort. It was called Win Back Your State. And I traveled to Mississippi. I knocked on doors with people running in Mississippi and with Ricky Cole, who was running for Agriculture Commission. So we have to show up and be present. 90% of life is being present, and we need to show up and we need to give people some hope, and we need to create the wins. We neglect county courthouses. We neglect the Register of Wills. There are so many offices that we could recruit people to run in. And you know what that takes? In a time of diminished trust in all institutions, there is still one authority that leaders do have, and two, actually, the ability to focus, the ability to convene, to call people to action. And people want to take action. We're all tired of grieving the way the election went last time. We can't change last time. We can change next time. And the South is one of our greatest opportunities to be able to do that.
I agree. And I appreciate what you said about how we just stopped fighting for civil rights, which, as someone from Memphis, Tennessee, we say that bullet rang through and assassinated Martin Luther King Jr. And it's like the city froze in time. So for so many of us in cities in the South, it's just like we kind of got frozen in time and forgotten about. And
mayors, the other thing that we neglect are the mayors that we have all
the mayors. The mayors. I actually do want to follow up on something about the mayors because you bring that up. Because you led the state that holds the great city of Baltimore, right? And I always say that Baltimore and Memphis have two things in common. We're both a little too black and too scary for a lot of these Republicans. And I just want to know what you will do as chair to hit back hard at the Republicans and stop how they demonize, destabilize, and disenfranchise these black cities like Baltimore, Memphis, St. Louis, Atlanta, New Orleans, because these assholes called Mayor Brandon Scott a DEI mayor because they couldn't use the N-word because they'd get knocked out. So I want to know how you're going to knock him out.
Yeah, I'm going to create a desk at the DNC for our mayors. Our mayors, I was endorsed last week by 60 current and former mayors, including Shirley Franklin, Wellington Webb, Mitch Landrieu. And we tend not to appreciate, and also Mayor Woodfin from Birmingham. So we tend not to appreciate the truth that people relate to their mayors. They trust their mayors. Mayors talk to kitchen table issues every single day, and they deliver tangible, visible things that people can see. So we need to make much greater use of our mayors to communicate. They are trusted messengers, and they can't be an afterthought. And that's generally what we do as a party. We think of White House, Senate, Congress, and we forget the fact, we bemoan connection in places close to home, and yet we have an abundance of mayors. And we did hit back strongly. A lot of times when these Republicans talk about city and those people who live in the city, it is absolutely intentional. It is coded, and we have to stop taking it. You remember, Donald Trump excoriating Elijah Cummings, who was my friend.
Oh, I remember.
About Baltimore as a rat-infested hellhole. We can't let that pass. We have to fight back against that, because there's a lot of people in cities who feel like we've abandoned them, just like people across the South.
Absolutely. And thank you for that, because as I said, we've got to have this effort. I don't think I saw, the mayor of Birmingham until I went to the executive order signing at the White House when it came to addressing gun violence. It took a tragedy for me to even be made aware on a national level of, this amazing mayor. And so thank you so much. I do actually want to also go back to Dr. Hathaway, because I have another question. And I know that you understand, and you've touched on this, how Republicans do a lot of dirty work when it comes to taking over state politics. Stacey Abrams and the Tennessee Three can't do it all. They can't just keep trotting them out when they need to, right? And I am wearing my Thank You Stacey Abrams sweatshirt today, but come on, she can't do the whole thing by herself. And so I want to know what you will do as the DNC chair to ensure that Democrats fight like hell below the federal level, because people want to see Democrats put Vaseline on their faces and tie their hair back. Very tired of just taking hits and not hitting back.
There have been several times, especially here over the last 3 or 4 years, that I have been in Nashville for family purposes as well as for political purposes. The state legislature just convened today. It was really my intention to be in Tennessee today, but some things kind of got shifted around. I say that because I marched in 2023 with the Tennessee Three when they were protesting gun violence, and there was a shooting at Covenant School. Just to bring this a little bit home, one of my two of my high school schoolmates, their father was one of the victims that was killed at Covenant School in Nashville. When things happen, not only does there have to be a mass voter registration effort to get the attention of election commissions, secretaries of state, there also has to be a mobilization effort. We can do both and. Social activism has to be more thoroughly connected to the Democratic Party. I've met the Tennessee Three several times, had conversations with them individually as well as collectively since they took a stand. Gloria, she speaks about how the reason why the vote did not expel her from the state legislature is because she was a white woman. She also ended up running for the United States Senate this last election cycle and lost to one of the most extreme Republicans, Marsha Blackburn. There are pockets of people all over this country that do the activism work, whether they step up to run for elected office or not. They still ought to be brought to the table, have a voice, have a say, and for their ideas to be implemented to the nth degree by the Democratic Party. I'm so glad that Ms. Houston, you brought up the fact that, there are so many disaffected, disinterested individuals that we don't want to address. We leave them by the wayside. We cast them off as a party. But that is the problem. There are people that are similar in scope as the Tennessee Three all across this nation that fight on the behalf of voting rights and civil rights and ending gun violence in our communities. Everyone wants the exact same thing, I truly believe. It's connected to hope and the American dream. But no one is willing, or very few people are willing, to have the hard conversations about American history and about race. I'm just
Well, they're trying to erase critical race theory. You know, we see what they're doing. They're trying to change the textbooks. I remember that whole fiasco just years ago when they, in the Texas textbooks, were calling, you know, slaves unpaid workers or whatever they referred to them as.
Immigrants. Just immigrants. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Here's one thing that I'm going to bring to the conversation too. You know, we can say that critical race theory started in this legal space, this legalese, and that it ought not be a part of our pre-K through 12 curriculum. Wrong. Wrong. Black history is American history. Hispanic and Latin history is American history. Those cultures, Asian history, minority history, women's rights, all those things ought to be folded into a cross-curricular manner. It ought to be taught in math and science and social studies and language arts and in our elective courses from pre-K all the way through higher education.
And you think that the DNC chair has a role with that education? I'm just wondering because it feels like so much of America is uninformed and Democrats and the party don't seem to want to take up the helm as far as educating people. The very basic things that I constantly have to teach folks on my social media platforms, right? And so I'm wondering, as an educator, as someone with a doctor of education, you would feel as the DNC chair that you have a role in educating people of America, not just throwing rhetoric at them.
I've been in this field of education by love, by training, by credentials for almost 2 decades now. So when I tell you it's my heartbeat, it's my heartbeat. And one of the other candidates, you know, talks about me, you know, to the point of being a high educational leader, chancellor, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. And as long as I have breath in my body, I'm gonna keep on fighting. I'm gonna keep on working hard. I'm gonna lay my all on the altar as long as I shall live. Point of emphasis. We have to educate and re-educate people on processes, what it means to be a Democrat in this country. We have to grow the tent. Once we get people registered to vote, they must be put in vote builders so that we can maintain that relationship, inform them about the topical and political issues of the day. We also have to tell people this is where we were, this is where we're going, and we need your help to execute this vision and mission. I say that because we have disinvested in the context of history. Some people have difficulty having those conversations, forming the words, contextualizing, don't want to highlight the portions of the curriculum that makes them feel uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. Not only should there be an emphasis on the largest mass migration in human history, the enslavement of the Africans, but we also have to talk about the rebellions, the revolutions, how we went about countering this system that occurred here in the Americas. Change the narrative. Everyone didn't lay down and get their backs whipped and lynched and hung up in trees and lost their limbs. That's not the all of the story. People were willing to lay down their lives and throw their children over ships to keep from being the slaves on 7 of these continents. I said it, I'm not taking it back.
Thank you, Dr. Hathaway. I appreciate that so much, and I appreciate everyone here. For those of y'all who I didn't have a chance to speak to, thank you so much. Did you at least learn something? Can I get a thumbs up on Shirley Chisholm's internet? All right. Beautiful. All right. So thank you all so much. I greatly appreciate it. I'm going to now pass it off to someone who has a fresher perspective than myself. Very excited. Gen Z content creator, Adam Mockler.
Thank you, Elizabeth. I thought your perspective was very fresh. I was going to say keep it short, but you guys already know that. The first question is for Ken Martin. Ben Wickler said this week, quote, Ken Martin has been the head of building up parties since Trump was first elected. He's been the vice chair of the DNC and hasn't done it. He's got the title, but he hasn't taken responsibility, and state parties haven't gotten the resources they deserve. Mr. Martin, how do you respond to Mr. Wickler?
Well, look, he's entitled to his opinion. He's not entitled to his own facts. I have great respect for Ben, and unlike him, I've decided to keep this race on positive and focus on what I'm trying to do for this DNC. And the last 8 years, the reality is we've made the deepest investments, the most historic investments in our state party in the history of the national party. And the reality is yes, we should be doing more. I don't disagree with him, but I don't control the purse strings. We negotiated in 2017 at a time when the DNC was deeply in debt. Remember, in 2016, we came out of that election. The morale was low. The DNC was in debt, $76 million. Our data infrastructure was way behind the Republicans. And of course, our state parties had been hollowed out the 8 years prior under OFA. In fact, there was no more 50-state strategy that Howard Dean created in 2005. That was completely eliminated. Our state parties were not receiving regular funding on the SPP on a monthly basis that they could plan around. There was no such thing as the Red State Fund. There was no such thing as a State Party Innovation Fund. These were all things I put together and created when I came into this role as the president of the ASDC. So it's just not right. It's completely wrong and erroneous to suggest that the state parties aren't receiving the support that they need. They need more, absolutely, which is why I say we need to double down on the 57 state party strategy that I actually wrote. We need to do more to support building the grassroots of our party. As I've said, we need to get the DNC out of DC, focus on a partnership exclusively with our state parties to contest every race in every zip code in every county throughout this nation. And look, I get it. You know what? I'm not going to get into it, only to say that we're going to keep our race positive. I deeply respect all of the candidates running in this race. And I will say this, Adam, I appreciate the question. Every candidate, including Ben Wickler, brings amazing skills to this race. And I'd be glad if any of them won, right? Because they all bring a different skill set to this conversation, and all of our skills are needed at this time. So I'm going to keep my comments focused on the positive vision that I have for this DNC. And when I win this thing, I hope to be able to tap into Ben Wickler's expertise. He's been doing a great job in Wisconsin. I hope to bring in people like James Skoufis and others, Martin O'Malley and others into this DNC to make sure we're tapping into all of their great experiences, all of their lived experiences and professional experiences. But I'm just not going to take the bait, Adam. We're going to keep this positive.
Yeah, no, I'm trying to keep it positive, but you guys are candidates running against each other. Mr. Wickler, can you respond and say how your vision differs from the other candidates?
Absolutely. And I appreciate those warm remarks. That I think the note that I want to draw with respect, and there's been a conversation about how to divide up the pie within the DNC, to have a bigger chunk of the DNC's budget go to state parties. The question for me is, how do we grow the pie? And I think that's where the challenge lies. Most people in the United States don't know that there is an entity in their state that's their state party. They don't know how to join the state party. They don't know what the state party does. And I think that what we have the opportunity to do, and I feel like we haven't done on a national level over these last 8 years, but that I've been proud to do in Wisconsin, is to put the work of the party on the map. There's the reason why this forum is so important is because people don't know what it is that the Democratic Party as an institution does. What we've been able to do in Wisconsin is to quintuple our fundraising, to get 450,000 grassroots donors across the country to support investing in our work. And what I want for the DNC is to build that kind of energy, to get millions more people involved in joining their state parties, joining their county parties, in pouring their volunteer energy into this work. That's what I feel hasn't been done across the country. And that is no shade on tons of people, including my fellow candidates in this race who've poured their hearts and souls into this work. But we need to be so much bigger to meet this moment, because the stakes in the elections coming up in Virginia and New Jersey this fall, in Wisconsin Supreme Court race this spring, across the country in 2026, the stakes affect the lives of every person in this nation. And we're going to need a party that people feel inspired to join, that is visible, that is winning, that is doing work that people can connect to. And if we do that, we'll supercharge every state party around the country, not just with a bigger check from the national party, which we absolutely need to do, but with more people jumping in, getting involved, providing those resources and that volunteer energy to win up and down the ballot, because people's lives are on the line. There are mega wealthy people trying to rig this entire country against working folks. And wherever you might be, you need a Democratic Party that is strong enough to fight back against that and deliver real change.
Thank you. I'd like to pass it over to Senator Skoufis. The right has been winning over young men for a multitude of reasons, and I'm not expecting any silver bullet answers from any of you, but can you name some actionable steps you'll take to reach out to younger generations in general, but also young men, which seem to be sliding right based on all polling? Some actionable steps.
Absolutely. It's a great question. And it's one of the demographics where we lost the most ground this past election cycle. And it starts by showing up in those mediums by which folks get their news. You know, there was a survey or a study done recently that looked at this past year, over 12 months, the 715 major podcast interviews that were political in nature. And you know what the breakdown was of those 715? 26% were Democrats who were interviewing, and 74% were Republican Party leaders. And of the 26%, by the way, the vast majority, not just 50, 55%, the vast majority were done by one Democrat, Pete Buttigieg. And so we've stopped showing up in new media. I'm thrilled we are having this forum. We've got to be doing a lot more of it. And the next DNC has to empower our creative class, has to empower our influencers, not by sending them a check and along with that check, some talking points from the DNC and party. We need to empower you to use the language and the issues that you've employed to build your followings and be authentic and get out our message in your own way, not in our way that doesn't work in many cases with the folks who tune into you guys. So, you know, that's what the next DNC has to do. And the only way we do that, and this is important, it oftentimes circles back to the same thing that I led with earlier on. The only way we do that is if we kick to the curb the crusty, old, stale consultants who we've been keeping on for far too many election cycles that we should have kicked to the curb about 10 years ago, quite frankly. And so I represent a new generation of thought and leadership running for a DNC leadership position here. And that's exactly what we need to turn the page on these old ways of doing things and start reaching people where they are, wherever they are.
Great answer. I want to say the same question over to Mr. Jason Paul. What are some actionable steps we can take on day one as the new DNC chair? What are actionable steps?
Well, on day one, I want to begin the process of changing the way we go about fundraising so that then we can have 10,000 organizers, one for every county plus the population I'm talking about. We need to do that because the only way we're going to overcome this is with people talking to people. I hear a lot about the new media space, and we absolutely need to be competitive in podcasts. We need to go on podcasts. But one of the things that the internet and Donald Trump have in common is that they're mean. And it is very hard to have a society where things that are mean, generally speaking, don't work out if your values are communitarian and caring about people. So we need to get back into the business of connecting people at a human to human level. We need a lot more staff we need a lot more staff and people to do that. And I love that Chair Wickler has 450,000 donors. That's a great start. But there aren't 450,000 donors for every state party now. He went and said, okay, we're going to do Wisconsin because Wisconsin's one of the core 7. Love it, needed it, absolutely had to have it. But we need that to get that model everywhere. We have to actually not have competing state parties. We have to have everybody rowing in the same boat so that we can have the people that we need, so that we can start talking to people again. And when we start talking to people on a person-to-person basis again, we can break out the loneliness, we can break out the meanness, and then we can sort of say, here's why we want to be a community.
Mr. Wickler, do you agree with what Jason Paul just said?
Yeah, I think this needs to be national. That's why I'm running for DNC chair now. We need to supercharge the whole thing so that we build strength at every level. And that's counties, that's neighbor to neighbor teams across the country, as we have in every community across the state of Wisconsin. That is a national party that works to build a strategy in each state and then to supercharge it. And to be able to do that, people need to trust that their funds will actually be used effectively. That's why I agree with James Skoufis. It's time to end any promises or any past commitments that the DNC might have and just look at how we win, how we find a diverse array of folks we can work with who reflect our values and our coalition and the path to victory at every level of the ballot. And that's something that the DNC has to do. And then we go out and we show that we can win elections. We can earn people's trust. We can earn their small dollar contributions and their most precious resource, which is their time. In Wisconsin, we've been able to build tens of thousands of volunteers into the daily fabric of our work. We knock on doors year round across the state, and we work in every election in a way that builds our strength for the next one. And I know there are Democrats in every state party that are hungry to do exactly that and haven't had those kinds of resources. What we need is, I think, a DNC and a DNC chair who has the experience of supersizing that kind of work so that we're building from the bottom up across the country in a strategy that makes sense in each state and adds up to a party that fights for working people in every corner of this country across race and ethnicity, gender, geography, generation. We need to be a party that when folks think about Democrats, they think fighters, people who are fighting for people like me. And they recognize that the Republicans are the party that tries to divide us up so they can rip off every person across this country.
Final quick question to Ms. Williamson. Democrats made gains in the Rust Belt states in 2020 and 2022, but it seems like we lost that. How do you propose we rebuild trust and rebuild a winning coalition in those areas? Concisely, thank you.
Well, one of the things we have to admit is what has happened to those states. And some of the terrible things that have happened in terms of taxation, in terms of some of these trade deals, the pain that has been experienced in these states, the Democrats and sometimes have initiated those things and certainly sometimes have gone along with them. You know, I think that a lot of what's happening in the Rust Belt is related to some of your questions about men. I lived in Detroit for 8 years, and I was a non-denominational minister at a large church there for 6 years. There were men who were usually having jobs that were tied to the automobile industry. And when that thing went down and everything crashed there and those businesses fell apart, people's lives were so destroyed. And one of the things I saw over and over and over again were men who had had good careers, men who had had good paying jobs, would be sitting in my office and there were tears streaming down their cheeks because this wasn't just a financial crisis as it would be for most women. It was a psychological and emotional crisis. My children will not respect me. I can't bear the fact that my wife is paying for us. There is a pride in the Rust Belt, and that had to do with productivity and creativity, and particularly for men. And I want to say something else about men going over to Trump. There's a namby-pambiness that set into the Democratic Party. And there are too many people who, including men, who've been attracted to Trump because he says what he wants and he does it. It's time for us to say what we want. We have been talking about courting people here tonight. How about we produce for people? We were talking about Black women. How about the fact that for Black Americans, there are the least positive healthcare results. Black women who are dying in maternity units. We need to talk about the fact that it's in so many Black communities where you have these sacrifice zones. And among the college loan deaths, it is mainly Black women who are carrying them. I think we can talk all we want about organizing and all of these things that are extremely important, but we have to produce for people. We have to make it clear what we want. And I think that that's the way we're going to get the Rust Belt back as well. We need manufacturing in this country. And to be honest, Donald Trump has talked about it more than Democrats have talked about it. We need to talk about the fact that you don't just let short-term profits for huge multinational corporate interests be your bottom line. People's lives thriving are your bottom line. Humanitarian ideals, democratic ideals. We have allowed this Rust Belt to be devastated, not just the economy. When an economy is devastated, people's lives are devastated. And we need to talk about healthcare. We need to talk about education. We need to talk about the environment. We need to talk about that. We don't even have to go get people. We will attract people as well as go get them once we're standing for things that we believe in. And that should start with places like the Rust Belt.
Yep, I agree. I think young men will appreciate if we can have a little bit more punch in our messaging.
Thank you.
Metaphorically, obviously. And
we have a weak underbelly.
Yep, I'd like to finally pass this off to Mr. Zachary Kirk, an author, an educator, an activist, to close this panel off. Thank you, everybody.
Adam, thank you so much for the pass off. Thank you guys to everyone who's been here. This is the last round of questions. We are almost done. I've thoroughly enjoyed every single response, and I definitely personally feel as though I've gotten a much deeper understanding of who you are and what you bring to this opportunity. So I'm someone who's rooting for all of you. I'm going to ask just a few questions to end us smoothly. With the first one going, so with candidate Williamson, you were the last one there, and now we have one more for you here. And this is my question. How would you address the growing divide between progressive and moderate factions within the Democratic Party, particularly at the local level, where these factions are getting way more vocal and way more diverse and polarized? What strategies would you employ to foster unity within our party while still allowing for healthy debate that moves the entire Democratic Party forward?
We've got to stop being so afraid of people having a debate and a conversation and not agreeing. The messiness of democracy is part of the power of democracy. What we saw in 2024 was people kicked off ballots. What we saw was a suppression of a primary for that very reason. We all have to be together. We all have to decide. We can't disagree. That's not what democracy is, and that's not what the Democratic Party is supposed to be. Yeah, some people are more moderate. They get to be. No one has a monopoly on truth. No one has a monopoly on truth, and everybody gets to own this country. I'm telling you, if I'm at a dinner party and the progressives are shouting and the moderates are shouting and the conservatives, that's a more exciting dinner party to me, and it's a more exciting party. This idea that unity is where, okay, no, we're not going to disagree. That's not unity. That's just an alliance. That's not deep. We are unified on values. Our cohesion must not just be external. It must be the fact that we believe in a party that advocates unequivocally for the working people of the United States, particularly in response to this neo-fascist assault coming at us, which is all about sucking the resources from the bottom 90% of the American people into the hands of a very few, cutting out things like Medicaid, drill, baby, drill, more and more defense spending. That's where we are united on our values. And we need to be honest, nicer to one another. Democrats have got to stop attacking other Democrats. We've got to stop putting people down because they don't agree with us. That's how I'd handle it. Everybody talk, everybody yell, everybody have fun. That's what democracy is. And when I was growing up, that's what the Democratic Party was.
How do we get that message out? I think that's a great message, right? Like, we can disagree. It's good and healthy to have these debates. It grows our party. But how do we get that message out from the DNC chair position to really make this broad coalition work? The Democratic Party's always been a big tent, but inside that tent, we keep fighting. But not only are we fighting, we're letting the fight get outside of the tent. And that's something that, unfortunately, our Republican counterparts tend to do a little bit better at maintaining. How do we, from your seat as a chair, how do we make that part happen? Keeping the fight healthy and robust, but keeping that fight a little bit more internal.
We demonstrated, and that's what I think is a very important role of the new chair of the DNC. It shouldn't be people who have kicked people off ballots. It should be people who say to everybody, you want to come into my, because this is how I see it. If you have an idea for a more beautiful America or a more beautiful world, come into my office. And my marker of success would be that when that person left my office, they felt I heard them. The young kids who were talking about Palestine, the young kids who were talking about Israel, whether it's somebody talking about healthcare, whether it is somebody talking about education, everybody should have a voice, and everybody should feel that the DNC leader is not just strategizing, oh, we're going to listen to these people, but not these people. I would demonstrate something very different than the elitist, arrogant, top-down leadership that has been far too not only prevalent within the DNC, but obvious to the entire country. This would be a whole new day. Everybody come in. I want to hear you. That doesn't mean I'm necessarily going to agree with everything, but you have a place in this party if you want to make this a more beautiful world.
Thank you. Candidate Skoufis, I have the same question for you, my friend, which is, again, how would you address this growing divide between the different people under our tent, from our leftist all the way over to our moderates? How would you address that divide?
Thanks for the question. And I'm going to say something I don't think I've said in any of the dozen or so forums that we've all participated in so far, and that is, I agree with Marianne Williamson on this question. I live and breathe coalition building in my Trump plus 12 district for the past dozen years. If I didn't, I would have lost by 15, 20 points about 2 months ago. And I have a college campus in my district, and I've got an Orthodox Jewish community of over 30,000 people in my district, and everyone in between, rural, suburban, exurban, urban centers. And I believe the reason that I'm able to do well in a district like this, that we as national Democrats have stopped losing in, is because I'm able to go to every quadrant, every sector, every different category of voter and do a lot more listening and a lot less lecturing. And even in those urban areas where it's a majority minority community, I'm a white guy who spent most of my time growing up in the exurbs. I overperform the top of the ticket even when there's a person of color at the top of the ticket, because voters are less concerned about us as a party, us as candidates, sorting them into these academic categories and buckets that I think we've fallen into the trap of as national Democrats in recent election cycles, and a lot more interested in being heard and having something done about the issues that they care about. And so, yes, some of my first meetings as DNC chair would be going to the Teamsters, going to the firefighters union and telling them, look, we clearly have not met your expectations. You didn't support our top of the ticket for the first time and as long as people can remember. And it starts by me telling you, we want you back in the coalition. Yes, we still are the Big Tent party, but our big tent has been shrinking over the last many election cycles. We have not dominated in a national election since 2008. 16 years ago was the last time that we romped the Republican Party nationally, and we've been hemorrhaging voters ever since. And so, yes, it begins by going back to these folks and saying, that, yes, we want you back in our coalition. It's not going to take 1 day or 10 days, maybe even 100 days to rebuild that trust. But it starts by going to them and saying, we want you back. How do we earn your trust back? That's certainly something that I would prioritize as DNC chair.
So my next question is going to go to Dr. Hathaway. But before I go to Dr. Hathaway, I want to follow up with candidate Skoufis, and I want to say, why is it that you think that we have hemorrhaged voters since 2008?
Oh, that's for me?
Yes. Why have we? Why do you think that the Democratic Party has hemorrhaged voters since 2008?
There are a lot of reasons why, but it all comes down to we have created a trust deficit with a lot of voters. And by the way, that's not just voters that are in the middle, center left or center right. It's the other end of our once big tent that has been fraying in recent election cycles as well. And so how do we get back to rebuilding trust? One starts by showing up everywhere. And we've been talking, every candidate's been talking about, we're going to start showing up everywhere again. We're going to start meeting people where they are again. Unless you've been to a hunting club and have told those folks, Democrats are not taking your guns. Unless you've been to a chamber of commerce and talked about increasing the minimum wage like I have in my Trump district, I don't want to hear from anybody about showing up everywhere if you haven't been doing it already. I've been living and breathing it every day for 12 years. So yeah, we got to meet people where they are and start being a national party again. And we talked about the South a lot before. And why now? Why now? Because in the next census, states like New York and Illinois and California and other blue states are going to be losing electoral college votes, at least as it stands right now. And states like Texas and Florida are going to be gaining them. The whole electoral math changes, and it changes in a real bad way for us in a few election cycles. So we have to expand the map. We have to start winning and competing in places like where I've won over the past 6 election cycles. But it also speaks to how we're communicating with folks. We have far too often found ourselves in an ivory tower looking down on a lot of voters. And I've been talking a lot about how we've got to get out of that ivory tower and back onto the factory floor. Stop pushing white paper talking points and trying to convince folks our economy's been doing wonderfully because our GDP year over year is better than France or the UK's since the pandemic, as if anybody cares about that when they go to the supermarket the next day after hearing that BS and seeing that their food prices have doubled over the last several years. We've got to be real with people. We've got to stop being overly academic and overly politically correct and start doing something about the issues they care about, even if those issues are uncomfortable for us sometimes.
Thank you so much. Dr. Hathaway, we have made some significant gains in this country with the election of LGBTQIA plus candidates. We are so appreciative as a community to have Representative Sarah McBride, former Senator LaFonza Butler, Representative Robert Garcia. My question to you is, how would you leverage the party's resources and influence to support openly gay candidates at all levels of government while pushing back against the anti-LGBTQ plus legislation that is prevalent in our home area, the South?
There's a time to lecture, there's a time to listen, and we all should be lifelong learners of all diverse groups within our party. The LGBTQIP plus community is a sizable voting bloc. When combined, they are about 26%. I think that's the last number I saw, about 26% of the voting population. With that being said, resources ought to be directed to uplifting their voices as well as all minority voices within the party. They too should have a seat on the committees, a ranking seat when it comes to our committees, our caucuses, our councils. They should have the autonomy and freedom to be able to come out from the shadows and recognize that they have a vested interest and we have a vested interest in who they are as a people. I know those buzzwords that we tend to toss around, love, who you want to love, all this kind of stuff, but is it tangible? Is it real? Do we feel it? Is it in our heart? Are these people in our family? Do we really accept them for the way that they are? Because they're not changing, even though some people may want to convert them and demonize them and, you know, all those things. But compromise is not a dirty word. I marched. I was in my home state. You know, I'm in Tennessee quite often. That's where my family is. But I marched with the Pride Parade back in, was it April of this year? You know, and we could all say, I have friends and family members that are part of this community, but that's a reality. Like, they are people just like everyone else. They are entitled to equality in their families and their relationships, to adopt children, not adopt children, live singularly, have equal access to health care just like everyone else. I campaigned on that in 2022 when I ran for Congress in Arkansas. But is it really in our heart? Or are we doing the realistic things to make that a part of our lives and the fabric of this country? We can say a whole lot of things, but until we are willing to execute, implement, see them as a part of this country that is not going away, we're going to be in for something. That goes for Black and brown and red and yellow and people across all economic and social spectrum of this country. We can say a whole lot of things, but it has to be real and sustainable and substantial in such a way that it changes and transforms people's lives.
Thank you. Thank you. Candidate Winkler, there are people who say that there has been too much priority spent in the last election cycle on garnering the support of the Black vote. What do you say to people who have that criticism, and how can we ensure that the needs of all Democratic voters and really all United States citizens are a part of your platform if selected as DNC chair?
The idea that Democrats spent too much effort trying to win the votes and earn the votes of any community is preposterous. We lost the election, and we lost the election because the other side got more votes than we did. And the key thing, if we want to build a party that wins, is to earn the trust of folks in every community across race and ethnicity, gender and geography, all across the country. What we know from looking at every election map and every exit poll is that across the whole country, Democrats have lost ground in every single state and DC. We had a smaller vote share than we did in 2020. And how did that happen? It happened fundamentally because millions of people felt like the support they got during the pandemic, the child care tax credit, the help to freeze evictions, the support that they got slipped away. Income went down while prices went up. We lost the votes of working people across every demographic, whether it was turnout going down or whether it was people sometimes switching over to vote. And I will say that Black voters in particular did not switch over to Republicans, despite a lot of prediction that would happen by a lot of pundits going into this election.
They stayed home.
There are a lot of people who stayed home. If we want to earn people's votes, We need to show them that we are fighting side by side with them, that we hear their voices, that we're fighting for them. We're fighting against the people who are trying to divide us in order to rip off working people across this country.
And how do we show that, though? How do we show that?
Well, this is exactly it. We're entering a challenging time. Trump is about to take power in this next week, and he is talking about essentially ripping this country into little pieces so that he and his friends can collect more of them and put them in their bank accounts. They're talking about a multi-trillion-dollar tax cut for billionaires that will be paid for by working people, some who voted for him, some people who voted for Harris, and some people who didn't vote at all. And we need to show that we are against that. We are for a country that actually works for working folks across this nation, and we need to fight like we mean it. That means working hand in glove with the union movement. That means knocking on doors and having conversations with people. That means going to bat against those who are trying to rip us all off and for a country that works for everyone. That's communicating everywhere. That means organizing year round. That means communicating across all the different places people get information, from streamers and from TikTokers and from in the places where people are not hearing from Democrats right now, because Democrats spend a lot of time on MSNBC, which I love MSNBC. I go on MSNBC, but that is not where the voters who stayed home are watching in 2025. And if we do that kind of fight, we might be able to stop them from passing these bad laws, but we will definitely show whose side we're on. If people think the Democratic Party is the party of the rich, that's because they're hearing more from Republicans than they are from Democrats. We are the party of working people, but we need to fight like it, we need to communicate like it, and we need to earn back trust from folks so that they know that if they vote for Democrats, we're going to be fighting for them in office.
I have one more direct question, and then I have one final question for everyone. And it's a really short and simple one that I think this is something that people really want to know. It's very important. And the last final direct question I have is for candidate O'Malley. What I want to know is, and this is something that my friends, they've been texting the same question over and over in the group chat. And they want to know from you specifically that the Democratic Party oftentimes is being put on the continuous defense. What would you do as chair to create and craft a message that puts the Democratic Party on the offense, pushing back against authoritarianism and fascism?
Yeah, look, this is the challenge of our times. I'm running for DNC chair because I know that the speed with which we reclaim this party's mantra of fighting for working people, fighting for economic security, is going to determine not only whether we win the next elections, but whether we preserve this republic. This is do or die time for us. So we need to up our game. We need to go on the offensive, and we're going to be able to do that, sadly, because of all of the things that Donald Trump's going to do, not only to harm the interests of the hardest working people. I mean, and that was the through line in this election. You know, the more inflation outpaced somebody's earnings, the more likely they were not to go to vote or to take a chance on hitting the refresh button for a really horrible person who feels like, you know, who has absolutely no respect for this republic and what this republic means. So this is definitely offense time. We might be the party in opposition, but that doesn't mean that we have to be on defense. We need to go on offense. We need to organize all the voices of this party. We need to get influencers, creators, all of the people that can fill up the tube, which is now the public square online, with the truth. The truth can defend herself, but she needs to be stated first. And we need to make sure that we are calling in that truth and make sure that that truth is marching all across the social media channels that people listen to and where they get their news. It's about the economy. It's about the republic. And we need to punch hard, and we need to punch as a group.
Thank you so much. I think we do need to punch, but in addition to punching, we also need to eat. And so this is my final question to everyone. And I'm going to turn it back over to our amazing host, the one and the only BTC, Brian Tyler Cohen. And the question for everyone, and we'll start off with candidate Martin, is this: what is your favorite snack? Real quick, keep it just honest and blunt. What is it?
My favorite snack is beef jerky.
Goofus, what you eating over there?
Ice cream right after this. One of my vices.
Candidate Williamson.
Green grapes.
Green grape.
Yeah,
Candidate
when they're
Paul.
hard. When they're hard.
So I'm Cheerios. I eat a ridiculous amount of Cheerios. It's bad.
I don't know if that, with the genetic modified food, I know somebody, may not be very happy about that. Candidate Winkler.
I like ice cream with as many chunks as possible. And sometimes, if I'm honest, I'm eating for the chunks rather than the ice cream.
Dr. Hathaway.
Chocolate chip cookies and red delicious apples.
Candidate O'Malley.
Old pizza.
Old pizza. And
No,
I think
I
that's
said old, not old.
Oh. Thanks. And I think that hit everybody, right? Didn't leave anybody. That's all my candidates on the table, right? Brian, take it away. And for me, it's simple, it's plain, it's just Lay's. Plain, simple Lay's. Brian, back to you, my friend.
Thanks, Zach. All right. Thank you to everybody for being a part of this. Two important notes here. The first is that this was the most watched DNC forum in history, which I get it, low bar, but still there were tens of thousands of people who did tune into this. And second, the audience for this forum was composed of 85% first-time viewers. That is a testament to how potent independent media is. It's a win-win. More people watching, more new people watching, and more people who feel like they have agency in this entire process, a process that was otherwise pretty obscure before now. There are just over 400 people who are ultimately going to decide this election for DNC chair. That vote will take place on February 1st in Washington, D.C. For the viewers, if you are excited about somebody, please feel free to post on social media about them. Feel free to volunteer. Feel free to donate. We've got agency here. We've got voices here. So please make sure to use them. Thanks again to the moderators for a job well done. Thank you to the candidates for taking the time tonight and for putting your trust in independent media. Thank you to Chorus Media for sponsoring this, and for those who want to support Chorus Media beyond this, you can follow all of the social media channels at We Are Chorus. And finally, thank you to the audience for taking time to watch this and for having a stake in the future of this party. All right, good night, everybody.